Hello, everyone, and welcome to this solo episode of the 107 podcast with myself, Jacob, as my co-host Ash is currently traveling the world and really living it up. So it is just me that you're stuck with for the review of this week's Australian Grand Prix. We are going to kick off the podcast, a new thing. After you've all followed the podcast on your preferred podcast platforms or reached out to us on Instagram or whatever socials you wanna catch us on. Come and find us there. But I am going to be saying whether or not I'm like a DNF or I'm pole position or how I'm feeling about F1 this week. And to kick things off, what a season opener. I am absolutely in pole position. I'm in P1. I am feeling good about F1 as a whole and F1 looking at the rest of the season. Not only was I super happy with the Australian Grand Prix, but I am very much looking forward to doing it all again this weekend in China. And don't you worry, there will be a Chinese Grand Prix preview coming very soon. But obviously first we have to talk about the Australian Grand Prix. So Friday and Saturday, seemed to run pretty much as normal. Then everything went to shit for a lot of people on the Sunday. Things just completely fell apart. For some teams, and for others, it was another day in the office. But it was particularly tough on the rookies. I mean, the first rookie who didn't really have the best weekend as a whole was Oliver Bearman. He had issues not only in qualifying, but also in the free practice sessions as well. Not even being able to take part in FP2 was a bit ridiculous. Not trying to blame anyone. It is what it is, but just obviously not great that he couldn't get much running in. And the other, like, flicking back or double checking, like, what the quali results were, Liam Lawson down in P18 is not great. He did seem to have some sort of an issue, but it's not great to be that far down. Especially when, compared to where Checo's performances were. It's a similar sort of performance from Liam on a Saturday when there was, no weather issues or anything like that. So, but it's his first proper race in the car, so I will give the other rookies as well the benefit of the doubt a little bit. And we'll see how they are after 3 or 4 races and see where they get to. Because they're all racing for brand new teams, brand new cars, especially not this weekend with the weather on Sunday. The other standout performance for me in qualifying, there were 2 actually. Yuki Tsunoda up in P5, which is ridiculous, and Alex Albon in P6. Both of them out-qualifying the Ferraris. Admittedly, the Ferraris were more set up for a Sunday wet race, so I think they compromised a little bit of their qualifying to, hopefully perform better in the race on Sunday. So I kind of get why they did that. But yeah, hats off to Yuki and Alex for pushing that far up on the grid. And Lando putting it on pole was absolutely fantastic. I was absolutely gutted, though, when Oscar had his pole taken away from him, because that would have been absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And it's such a shame what happened to Oscar in the race, but we will get to the race and what exactly happened to Oscar a little bit later on. Obviously, main sort of on a Sunday, main sort of thing that happened first off, Hadjar. I was absolutely gutted for him. I'm going to go ahead and say it. I don't think it was a skill issue. I think it was purely rotten luck. If it was skill, then it is what it is, but I'm chalking this up to just the most horrible luck. He took a line on a little bit of like a paint, I guess, which isn't FIA paint, but is just normal paint, so it's slippy. I don't know why, for example, if this is a street circuit most of the year, they wouldn't just use FIA paint on the normal track anyway, if they know what it's going to be used for. But anyway, Hadjar obviously spinning out and going into the barriers, gutted for him, absolutely gutted. Like I said, I don't really blame him at all. I mean, he didn't finish the race, but a lot of the rookies also didn't finish the race. So, I mean, he just didn't do any of the laps, I'm afraid. And Anthony Hamilton coming out and Lewis's dad, if you don't know who that is, coming out and supporting him was absolutely fantastic and a real, true show of class. and it shows you exactly how and why Lewis is the man that he is, I think, is the way I'm going to put it. Yeah, class act, absolutely class act, to console him and let him know that, like, this isn't going to, I don't know what exactly was said, but probably something along the lines of, like, there's always next week, this what, don't let this define you, this won't define you, this is, it's just, chalk it up to bad luck. Like I said, it's just horrible luck. The conditions were awful. This was not, for me at least, like I said, I don't see this as like being like a skill issue or anything like that. It was such an easy mistake to make, and even an experienced driver or two made similar off the track mistakes as well. So yeah. But moving on, well, I'm going to stick with that actually. The comment Helmut Marko made about Hadjar crying, disgusting. I don't know how there is a place in the sport for Helmut Marko anymore. I don't understand it. I just don't. Sorry. Moving onwards swiftly, we then had like a reset of the race, and we had very nearly Max Verstappen sort of trying to take the lead at the beginning, getting past Oscar. It was a really interesting first few corners. Fantastic. Had me on the edge of my seat. Up until obviously I saw that Doohan had binned it. And yeah, it's for Doohan, it's not good. Again, he wasn't the only person who DNF'd or crashed or whatever, but it's just not a great look. For Doohan, who's under a lot of pressure for his seat. I'd argue he's under more pressure than Hadjar. But yeah, really not good for him. And then we had that really freak accident again with Carlos Sainz, where he seemingly got like a torque blip when going around the final corner, and just spat into the wall. Yeah, for somebody as experienced as Carlos, F1 TV said that, or like alluded to, I don't know the full story as to whether or not it was a car issue or not a car issue, but they seem to suggest that it was a car issue. And this is very unlike Carlos to make a mistake like that. So yeah, and this is one of the good things for the drivers who did make a mistake. There's China this weekend. Like there's already the immediate chance to better last week's performance and to put the next foot correct. So I that's one of the reasons why I think like maybe this race being a double header with China immediately gives some of these guys a good chance of redemption. Then we had the restart again, where Lando sort of managed to keep things going and maintain his lead. We then had a spin from Kimi Antonelli, who managed to keep it out of the wall. I think had he spun in a different area of the track, we would have been having a completely different conversation. But he managed to get the save done nicely after overtaking Nico Hülkenberg, who he then overtook again. But yeah, I love the little pirouette that luckily didn't end in some sort of damage. We then had, honestly, a very, very tense battle with Max and Piastri and also Lando at the front as well, where they were all pushing each other. They just were all pushing each other, and it was absolutely fantastic to watch. This is the racing that we want to watch. This is, world champion, 4-time world champion going up to potential future world champions, and just battling it out in the wet, where every single, centimeter counts, every single gentle application of the throttle, every single thing is just on a nice edge. It was fantastic to see. And obviously Max ended up making that mistake, which let Piastri go back into P2, which then set up like a really interesting, not battle between the two, but Piastri was trying to stay close to the back of Norris, and seemed to be the quickest car on track. I don't know whether or not that was because Norris was managing, or Piastri was just trying to push because it's his home race. I genuinely couldn't tell you which one was which. It seems like there was a little bit of delayed team radio, and I'm going to go ahead and say I understand why McLaren told Piastri to just hold off a little bit because they wanted to make sure that the cars were safe. The cars, for example, any sort of battle or incident, especially in the wet, didn't mean that, you know, they got sucked back into a position where they lost the race. And quite frankly, although Piastri then had an issue, which then meant he was, you know, brought back quite a bit. He dipped into the gravel. I think it was turn 6. I want to say they controlled the race still. They didn't mess anything up with the strategy, and that shows maturity from McLaren stepping into this championship, which is exactly what I critiqued them for last year. It's only race 1. Will this be a habit, or was this a one-off? We will have to wait and see, but I only have this to go off of, and so far, I think they did the right things during this race in terms of like strategy calls and stuff like that, especially at this point. You know, there's no point in battling at the front where, you know, there's a great risk of, you know, an incident or another car coming up behind or whatever. So you have to let them fight fairly because you're going after constructors again. You know, you can't be messing around. It's super important to not throw away that lead like they did so many other times. Lap 34, I can see Alonso managed to spin. This was another weird one. And I have a little bit of a theory around this. So you can see for Alonso, I think it was Gasly who was ahead of him. Gasly looked like he dipped into the gravel and spread gravel on the track. And then Alonso seemed to follow in. And it's almost as if, like, bear with me, but the water, and this might be completely wrong, there was water obviously on the inside curb, and Alonso's taken the inside curb, and had there not been gravel there, probably would have been fine, but because the gravel raised the tyre away from the tarmac just that little bit too much, he aquaplaned. It might sound ridiculous, but obviously with gravel, obviously it's teeny tiny, and it's going to make the wheel spin a little bit, and then combined with increasing the height, although it's going to be like a millimeter, you know? But I think it's just a concoction of what could possibly, like everything that could possibly go wrong going into a corner, especially a fast corner like that, which ultimately ended up with Fernando Alonso in the wall. So another rookie out, I'm afraid, which is really, really tough to see. This then caused a safety car, which enabled, you know, some quick pit stops before Fernando's car was like cleared away. And it was at this point where, you know, drivers started pitting for like dry weather tires. You could see a dry line. It was looking really good. All of a sudden, over the radio, there's rain coming. And just chaos, just utter chaos ensued. We had both McLarens at the front go off, not expecting that whatsoever. And this is where I might spend a little bit of time sort of breaking this down, because Lando goes off and somehow manages to keep the momentum of the car on the track and manages to carry it around that last corner. However, Piastri making a very similar mistake. The lines are slightly different as they come off the road, and Verstappen is just in the background, like ready to pounce. But so I was gutted, absolutely gutted for Oscar to have span off at the end, like that. Not at the end, but like just there. And it's his home Grand Prix. He could have won his home Grand Prix. Gutted is the word. If I were him, I'd be inconsolable. That was such a horrible way for things to have played out. And I love Oscar. I think he's absolutely fantastic. And what I'm about to say now is why I really, really think Oscar is the shit. He goes off track. He's stuck in the grass. They cut to shots in the garage of just dismay and everyone just disheartened. And they show a replay of him going off as well. And while all this is happening, we do have another incident with Charles Leclerc spinning round, and there's a couple of other bits and pieces that happen, right? Somehow, Piastri manages to find some grip. I don't know where he found this grip, right? And if Oscar had also managed to not get the car moving, there probably would have been a safety car because there was a car stopped on crack. Jesus, there was a car stopped on track or just off track that they obviously would have needed to recover. But he somehow found some grip to reverse out so slowly, and the crowd. I've seen some recordings from social media. The crowd went absolutely mental. The fact that he managed to recover that, and this is what I'm talking about. The determination and the grit that he displayed there is exactly why you cannot discount him as a world champion for this year. That's exactly why he did not give up. I know it was his home race and there's going to be, an extra couple of percent in it. He didn't give up. I'm going to skip forward a little bit as well, but combine that the timing page said DNF. The timing page was like, he's done. And then all of a sudden you see this slowly moving little papaya car reversing up to the tarmac so that he could give it another go. He rejoined the pack at the end, at the back of the pack, and skip forward a little bit, overtook Lewis Hamilton in one of the fastest parts of the track on the outside in the wet. That overtake was a masterclass. Like, if that isn't included in Overtake of the Month, which I think only this Grand Prix and the next Grand Prix are included for, if that isn't included as like one of the overtakes of the month, what is the point of doing the award? Like, it showed such courage, and I'm talking him up like he's my own son, but like literally just the display of skill was fantastic, and the fact that he did not give up after having a horrible setback. He managed to claw his way back up into the points as well. He finished P9. I was just double checking. He finished P9 from being all the way down. If he'd have just trundled around at the back, it would have been P14, P13. So ridiculous. Just such grit and determination. And that is exactly why I made sort of the prediction at the beginning of the year. I thought that he was going to be world champion over Lando if they have the fastest car, and by the looks of things they have the fastest car. So this is going to be a very, very interesting year for the two boys in McLaren. That's enough talking about Lando Norris. We're going to enough talking about Oscar Piastri. We're going to come back and talk about Lando towards the end of this podcast. But yeah, I just so impressed by him, just unbelievably impressed. All the while this is going on, while Oscar's not taking a break, but stuck in the grass. Red Bull are like and ahhing about whether or not they should pit or shouldn't pit, and it was very touch and go at points, and they seemed to change their mind as well, just as Max was about to come round to the start of the pit lane to pit from mediums to inters, and that meant that because he'd stayed out, but Norris had pitted, it was super easy for Lando to then retake the lead. But this was only after Hamilton and Leclerc both stayed out on hards in that weather. It looks like there was some sort of radio miscommunication and stuff like that between the drivers and the cars. But to me, considering that it was 50-50 as to whether or not we go for wets or we stay on the dries or whatever, I probably would have split the strategy and given one of the cars the inters and one of the cars staying on the hards, but that's just me. And hindsight is a beautiful thing. But yeah, that was a very interesting call from Ferrari, and clearly one that they got wrong. Norris was so easily able to retake the lead. It wasn't even a challenge, really. This is where Liam Lawson then crashed. I don't really have too much else to say about Liam Lawson's off. It's just not great, and disappointing from him as well. And then Bortoleto crashing almost immediately afterwards as well. Both of them DNFing. It's just, it was very, very treacherous conditions. It was such harsh and hard rain. And again, this is why I'm not passing judgment too much on a lot of the rookies, just yet, because it was just trial by fire. It was absolutely horrible. Brought out a safety car, which then obviously Hamilton and Leclerc pitted under, and they threw away, their track position that they had sort of gained, even though they would have really lost it because they hadn't pitted at the right times. Yeah, interesting to say the least. Then we had green flag again, and it was literally just Norris trying to control the pace of the race to try and stay ahead. We then had a really nice midfield battle between the Ferraris and Gasly and Piastri also coming through, and obviously that's when we had Gasly fell back quite a bit and fell out of the points. And like I said, the overtake that Piastri had on the last lap, the last corner, was ridiculous. And this is when I'm going to talk up, Lando and Max as well, having that battle at the front. It's fantastic to watch. And this is what I mean. It came down to 0.9 seconds between the two. I don't know if Lando was managing or just trying to keep things calm, or I don't really know what the deal was, but it seemed like Max tried to extract everything he possibly could out of that Red Bull to try and beat Lando. It was such a good battle to see, not only, like I said, at the end, but also throughout the race as well, especially at the beginning too. A really great battle, and for a fact that is not going to be the last on-track battle that we see between the two this season. It just simply won't. And a huge congrats to Lando. For me as a McLaren fan, other than Piastri's mishaps, you couldn't have asked for a better season opener. And I'm super, super happy to see Lando leading the Drivers' Championship for the first time ever, which is insane. And the first driver since Max Verstappen to lead the championship for years. I think did Charles Leclerc lead it? I think. At one point during the season, where Ferrari were doing pretty well. I want to say 2022 maybe. Anyway, that's what I mean. It's been that long. It's been years since anyone else was top of the Drivers' Championship. So this is, a big change, a very big change, and one that I'm looking forward to see whether or not he'll keep it or not, or hopefully he'll keep it. Maybe we'll see. Going backwards, teeny tiny bit, the one rookie so far that I haven't really mentioned, Kimi Antonelli. Smashed it. Absolutely smashed it. Yes, he did have that spin. But he kept it controlled. Unlike all of the other rookies, he managed to keep it on track and actually score a really decent points haul. Finishing P4, even though then he had a time penalty that was then reversed. Whatever. I mean, it was reversed, so great. Or good for him anyway. Not so good for Albon, who finished P5, which is fantastic, by the way. Albon finishing P5 is monumental for that Williams team. But yeah, Antonelli, fantastic. Hats off to him. He might be the real deal. He might actually be the real deal. There might be something there where, and I was very cautious of saying, he's just a rookie. Don't put so much expectation on him. And I very rarely put expectation on rookies. I did question whether or not his journey to F1 was too quick, maybe a little bit too quick. After that performance, I'd say no. I'd say he's ready. It's a trial by fire. It's not a school to learn in. It is, you come here and you show you're ready, or you don't live up to the expectation and you're out. And Kimi delivered on Sunday. It was a really, really good drive to see. One thing I would say is Russell just sort of didn't really do anything that notable other than keep it on track and keep the pace really good, and he ended up with a podium. It's really odd how that isn't the first time that Russell has sort of just gone rather unnoticed, or to me at least anyway. He might not go unnoticed to, some people, but to me he went relatively unnoticed and finished on the podium. So I also have to say congrats to Russell and to Mercedes, for smashing it with strategy calls and with the pace they displayed. It is in a cooler weather climate, which is sort of where their car performed well last year. So it's going to be interesting to see whether or not they can carry that performance through to different tracks and different temperatures as well. And then looking further down, like I said, P5 for Alex Albon. It would have been really interesting to see where Carlos finished had he finished the race. I mean, because he started in front of Albon. No, sorry, he started just below Albon. So maybe like a P7, P8 sort of thing. Maybe you would have happened for Carlos. We don't know. We have no idea. But it's going to be super interesting to see Carlos compete like a full Grand Prix in China this weekend. And another person who seemingly went very under the radar, Stroll, P6. Honestly, a lot of people came into this race and said that Stroll wasn't going to be particularly strong, and there's a lot of memes, and he gets a lot of stick, does Stroll. And honestly, he did very well. He seems to do really better, a lot better in the rain. I mean, you saw the pole lap that he did, or the pole that he achieved in Turkey in 2020. This is what I mean, and that was in the wet as well, in the Force India BWT car. Like, so he can pull performances out of the bag. So it's going to be interesting to see where his season goes as well. And Nico Hülkenberg finishing above both Ferraris is just insane. In a Sauber that, only scored points at one round last year, to have already scored, I think they've already scored the same amount of points as they did the entirety of last year in one race this year. So the only way is up for Sauber, apparently, especially with Hülkenberg in the car. It's going to be super, super interesting to see that too. Nothing else really of note in terms of looking further down, other than Behrman really did not have a very comfortable Grand Prix over the whole weekend, which I mentioned before. But I think there's very clearly problems with that Haas car that they are looking into. And hopefully they can get it sorted sooner rather than later. But yeah, it was not the best performance from Haas. But yeah, overall, Australian Grand Prix was absolutely fantastic. That is how you do a season opener. I thoroughly enjoyed myself, even though I had to wake up at stupid o'clock in the morning. It was worth it. And looking forward to China. I also can't wait. It should be such a good race as well in China. I'm just looking as well at what time I have to be up for China. And the sprint race from 4 till 5 a.m. in the morning for me. But qualifying is 8 until 9. I'm honestly thinking, do I just get up slightly earlier and watch the sprint at 7, so I can watch the sprint and then go straight into qualifying? I might do that, genuinely, so that I don't have to get up at stupid o'clock on Saturday morning. That might be quite nice, because even the sprint qualifying is 8:30 in the morning for me, so that's not too bad. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking I'm probably going to end up doing. But yeah, looking forward to China, absolutely. And before we wrap up the show, I am just going to quickly talk about fantasy. If you haven't joined us on the F1 Fantasy on the 107 League, please do come and join us. Quick roundup from me. I had an absolute stinker of a weekend. I decided I was going to play it safe. I was like, I'm going to play it safe, and I'm going to pick experienced drivers. So I had Verstappen, good pick. I had Sainz, not a good pick. Didn't finish the race. Got me. Hold on, I'm just looking at the results, and Sainz got me minus 19 points. Great, cheers, Carlos. Oscar got me 10 points, but he was my double DRS driver because I hoped that he'd maybe win. Obviously if he'd have finished the race further up, we would not be having this conversation. Nico Hülkenberg got me 20 points because of the race positions gained, which is 10, which is outrageous. And Fernando Alonso was my other driver pick as well. He got me minus 20 points. So I had minus 39 points just from my two drivers. And then my two constructors were Williams and Haas. Obviously Haas did almost nothing. And Williams, they obviously had one DNF. So I was minus 40 points on one driver / team combo. It was not good. My total points were 54 over the weekend, which is terrible. I did try to have a look and see like what the highest scoring team would have been. And one of the teams, admittedly, they used the extra DRS. They scored 344 points. They had Lando as their triple DRS and Antonelli as their double. Then they had Behrman, Yuki, and Hulkenberg at Mercedes, and Haas as constructors as well. So hats off to Maria Godinez, who is currently top of the Fantasy Formula league, who we're sort of part of at the moment as well. And meanwhile, I'm down at 24,224th. Yeah, really, really not good. But yeah, hopefully, I mean, to be fair, they did use DRS tokens and stuff like that. I should have, and I did think about it, use the no negative token. I should have used it. But it's going to be probably a lot of change for this weekend in China, which starts in a few days. So if you've made it this far through the podcast, I'm going to start wrapping things up. If you haven't already, please do follow us on your preferred podcast platform. That would be much appreciated. We do really love it when you support the podcast. And Ash does too. Even though he's not here, I'll speak on his behalf. He loved the race too. He was watching it in a bar, and he sent me a couple of messages about it too. Crazy. Like I said, this race was everything we wanted a season opener to be, and it has set the season up. I set expectations pretty high, actually. I'm not going to lie. Like, I'm now expecting the races after this to be very, very good. But only time will tell. Thank you very much for listening. We'll see you in China.